My name is Joe Kwon.
My name is Andrew, and welcome to episode 23 of the Normless podcast.
Good stuff, boys. It's welcome to have you guys on the podcast today. Really excited about this one again. You know, we had Simon Finneck on a couple of weeks back, and he's got his social enterprise Fruit to Work. And today we're going to talk a little bit about Confit Pathways and Confit Gym, but also, you know, what you're doing, Andrew, with one out training and the whole mindset behind the one out mentality. But I think before we get into the details of all the good work you guys are doing behind the scenes now, it's really important we take a step back and look at how you got to this point in your lives. And I think not only have you both had very interesting prison experiences, but, you know, Andrew, you knew a lot about Joe before you even met each other. And it was through the prison system that you guys built a really strong bond. So can you tell me a little bit about that?
So funny story. Every time I went to a new jail, someone would ask me, do you know Joe? Do you have a brother? And I'm like, Joe, no, and I don't have a brother. I'm an only child. And I'm sure you have an only brother. And the boys are absolutely adamant that I had an older brother. Anyways, and then everywhere that I went, even when I got to my final part in my lagging, which is what they call like a jail sentence, the work release place that I was working for, my boss was like, I'm sure you have an older brother. Please tell me that your brother is Joe Kwon, because everything that you do reminds me of Joe. And I go, no, I do not have a brother. And then when I got out and I seen Confit, and I'm like, oh, this guy is Joe Kwon. And then I followed him. He followed me back. We were messaging back and forth. Turns out we had a lot of mutuals. And yeah, like even though we lived like a completely a different jail sentence, like at a different time, a lot of our experiences were very similar.
It's a fair assumption, isn't it, Joe? Because, you know, you both got really similar mentalities. You're both into fitness, and, you know, your experiences and stories very, very similar, isn't it?
I think, yeah, the reason why so many people were in custody, and it was unfortunate we didn't get to cross paths in jail, but Andrew kept on arriving at the center as soon as I left. And as inmates, you do get moved around a lot to different centers, because for various reasons. But I think a lot of people can kind of relate. They related both of us together because we were training like animals inside, you know, and like what we're doing today, the reason why we became trainers was because we found a sense of kind of escapism, sense of purpose through training while we were incarcerated, you know, and that's why today, at our organization at Confit and Confit Pathways, our slogan is train to be free, because even though our bodies were incarcerated, our minds used to be free, you know. And Andrew understands that through his experience, and same as me. And you know, people could see like that we were different individuals while we're inside, you know, very different from everyone else who just come out to do like a couple push-ups. But we found a way of training, pushing past, you know, certain limits and barriers, to stay in a positive mindset and to be able to test things with our body as well, you know, through physical activities. Yeah.
One of those barriers in particular in the jail was lack of access to equipment. So, you know, barbells, dumbbells could be seen as weaponry in the gym. So can you tell me a little bit about how you, I guess in a COVID kind of time around that 2020 would have been really invaluable, a lot of those things that you would have developed your time in prison. Can you tell us a little bit about what training was actually like in prison?
Andrew, you want to kick this one off first?
Yeah, sure. So when I was inside, at the beginning of my sentence, I came across the boys that were using a lot of the water bags as training, kind of like using it as dumbbells and water bottles as dumbbells. And I wasn't really too much of a fan of it. At the beginning of my lagging, I wasn't really interested in training that much, because I thought, I'll just wait till I go to the gym till I get out, and I'll just use the gym and I'll get big then. And then halfway through my sentence, I realized that like something had to change. Time was of the essence, and I was getting out soon, and I need to get fit. And I kind of just stuck with all the body weight exercises, because after like a month of training, like I realized it was actually working. You just needed to put the reps in. And then I only ever really used the bottles as weighted for weighted pull-ups and weighted dips and walking lunges. Really, I never really used it for like the small stuff like the other boys who they were using like bicep curls, and the bicep curls on the broomstick. Now, I wasn't really a fan of that, but I was using a lot of the weights just to add extra resistance on the body weight movements. And then when COVID happened, like what Joe was doing, it was just like I was back in jail again.
Yeah. And it's a really good set of skills, no doubt, you developed. And do you think, like I saw a promo video with you, Joe, for the work you guys are doing with UNSW. And in that promo video, there was a lot of squats with other blokes on your back, or, you know, carrying those water drums, as you said. Is that very similar to what you guys were doing in jail, or?
Yeah, so look, inmates are known to be very, very good at improvising.
Yep.
Obviously, you gotta make good of what you have around you, and we had like literally nothing around us. And you know, later on we realized how effective the training that we were doing inside custody. You know, for example, you know, Andrew was mentioning the use of water bottles, but little did we know, water bottles, the use of water bottles helped us with our stabilizer muscles. You know, when we didn't have weights, you know, we're using other human beings to jump on our backs and to use it to improvise as weights. You know, we're using towels to work out how do we use isometric, like how do we use hypertrophy training by using towels, you know, understanding that, you know, that mind and muscle connection through the use of towels, you know, and through these very, very raw techniques, we'll have able to understand, have a better understanding of our body and how to train and explain that movement to other people as well. So that really gave us a foundation of having a different understanding of, you know, how to deliver training programs for people, you know, and that's how we became trainers. And, you know, you mentioned COVID, and it's funny because, you know, we used to figure out how do we best utilize our body weight pretty much in training, like push-ups, dips, you know, and when COVID lockdown happened, you know, when everyone was so used to using gym equipment and all these facilities and stuff like that, all we had was our bodies and our small little tiny cell that we used to train in. And overnight, we became the experts in confined space bodyweight training, you know, and you know, we were actually running classes for Google and Atlassian and all these other corporates who had no idea how to provide wellness for their employees. And not only did we know how to utilize small spaces, but we had the right mindset around, you know, how do you be positive in an environment where, you know, individuals are feeling incarcerated, you know. So you know, who would have thought that there would be a time in history where being incarcerated would be considered a skill, you know. So it was a bit of a turnaround for us.
Yeah, well, you're accepted into UNSW during prison, and in that time you were confined, you basically, there's nothing else you can work on but yourself, really, is there? You know, so when we take a step back now, we go right back to the 27th of November, 2007, Joe, the Shangri-La Hotel. You ordered room service and you got a knock on the door. Talk us through the preceding moments, mate.
So I'll give you a little backstory. So my mom's an opera singer. So she came to Australia as an international student on a scholarship to the Sydney Conservatorium of Music. And even though we grew up in very marginalized communities, so mom was single mother, working 2 jobs, studying full time for a master's. So she hardly had any time to look after me. But when she did, she used to always take me to the opera house to watch opera. So I was the only kid in the hood that could listen to opera and tell you the difference between a clarinet and an oboe, right? So a little bit of a backdrop, but years later, obviously, like my mom living that lifestyle, you know, being an opera singer might look very like grand or whatever, but the reality was we were doing it tough, you know. So I ended up getting into crime, and at the age of 21, just a month after my 21st birthday, I did a massive drug deal at the executive suite at the Shangri-La in the morning. So I still had close to about $30,000 cash. I think it could have been more, but it was on the coffee table, and I ordered room service because I was feeling hungry. I ordered a big breakfast and orange juice and a long black, and I knew room service was coming up, so I put a bed sheet over the coffee table, like over the cash. And then I get a knock on the door, and I'm thinking that it's room service, and then literally the door busts open and you see all these guys wearing balaclavas with machine guns coming in, and the first thought was, this isn't my breakfast order. And the second thought was, shit, I'm getting robbed, because that's what happens in the game. There's a lot of times you do a drug deal and they set you up to get robbed. So I've thrown the cash everywhere on the floor thinking, they're just after the cash, not me. I want to get away with my life pretty much. And the next thing I know, I'm running beeline towards the door, and I get a machine gun to the side of the head. And literally, I'm like in a concussed state. I hear the words, "This is the police, you're under arrest." And I got hogtied on the floor. Literally I had like $100 bill stuck on my face. Everything was in slow motion. I'm looking out the floor to ceiling window of the executive suite of the Shangri-La Hotel, and I see the Opera House. And literally memories of my childhood come flooding back, of how I've taken everything for granted in my life up to that point. And that was literally the last view of freedom before getting sentenced to 13 years at the age of 21.
Fucking, it must be like when we look at movies and we see like these hardened criminals and they've been doing drug dealing for years, or they've been running these drug cartels, and like you were just new to it. You were just trying to help your family almost because you were struggling. And in that moment, when you see these guys bust in the door, it would have been like, I can't imagine how that felt within your body, like the amount of adrenaline. Like you say time stopped and you're looking at the Harbour Bridge, but you must have been having a massive amount of stress.
Oh man, it's obviously that any moment of getting, I don't know what you felt, Andrew, when you were getting arrested, but it's a huge shock. You don't feel like it's reality. And in my mind, I'm thinking, oh, I'm gonna get out of this. I'm gonna get out of this. So I'll probably get bailed out. We can work this out. And I think that's what goes through everyone's mind. Or we're gonna get bailed out. We're gonna work. We're gonna, you're always thinking about the most positive scenario. Yeah. Yeah. But the reality is, like, you're gonna pay for the crime that you've done. And like you mentioned, a lot of these individuals, including myself, who get into crime, don't initially get into crime because they love crime. It's a byfactor of, a lot of disadvantage that they grew up in. It's the environments that they grow up in. It's not always a choice to want to get into crime. It's because there's no other supporting factors. There's no other supporting positive factors that lead you to do something better. It's only later on when you realize, oh crap, there's more to life than this. That's when a lot of people make the change. But to be honest with you, for a lot of people that are still currently in crime, doing crime or in jail, I'll be honest, it's ignorance of the fact that there's more positive things out there. And even if they know that there are positive things that are out there, it's a lack of self-worth and self-belief that they can do it. They go, well, I can't do that. I don't have the education. It's that kind of limiting mindset that holds a lot of people back as well.
And at this stage in your life, you probably thought everything was coming to a close, everything was ending. But in fact, like many of the guests we've had on the podcast, this, I guess, adversity was just the beginning of the start of your life. And we'll get on to Andrew's story and we'll tell his tale in just a moment. But I want to talk about, preceding that, before that moment. As you said, you grew up in a community where you were struggling, you and your family were struggling, but it was a community of violence and a lot of negativity. You were surrounded by crime and it felt like your only natural path. You were expelled from every school that you attended. And crime was one of those things that was probably the only thing you knew. And at the age of 21, as we just discussed, you were arrested by police and sentenced to 13 years in prison. I understand you served 9 years of those 13, directing a criminal enterprise. Tell us more about the actual enterprise itself and what you were doing.
So I got done. So when you get sentenced for a drug syndicate, they always put you in a level. So there's various levels of that enterprise hierarchy, whether you knowingly take part, you're a runner, your middle management, or your top management, or your syndicate leader. I was charged as a syndicate leader. There were 9 of us that got arrested. So we were predominantly dealing with MDMA and pressing into pills. Only because for me, I was still at a young age. That's what I knew. That's what I was surrounded by. I really didn't get into any of like cocaine or ice or anything. That wasn't my environment at the time. It's different for everyone else, but that was, from a young age, I used to go to all these underage parties, and because like the people that were around me were still fairly young, that's what we knew, and that was our contacts. And it just kind of escalated, like, I started off doing small amounts of like petty little drug deals here and there in high school, but it just started escalating after a while.
And I think that resonates with Andrew, doesn't it? We'll talk about your story, but it kind of scaled up, and as you saw more money coming in, you kind of got a bit more greedy, a bit more, your ego kind of built as you were getting away with it. And this was something that you experienced, Joe, as you were dealing these drugs, more and more money coming in, you sort of to scale up how much you're dealing and the quantity?
Like, to be honest with you, looking back, I go, man, only if I knew the things that I knew now,
Yeah.
right? But, uneducated kid, I got expelled from every school. I didn't know anything else. Where else was I meant to get that amount of money? For any young person or even adults, that large amount of money, that sums of money, like, it's very enticing, and that's something you've been doing since you're from a young age. It's really hard to think twice about it.
Yep.
Because that's your norm, that's what you're used to. That's your environment, but like I said, if I had knowledge of other things, if I had positive mentors or people in my life that were educating me and telling me around about like other opportunities there are and pathways to those opportunities, maybe it could have been a different situation. Maybe, and I understand that at that age, my mindset was completely different as well. But I didn't have any of those paths. Like, I knew there were these things that existed. I knew there were people making legitimate money. But I just didn't know how to get there. Nor did I at the time want to, because I'm like, oh, that probably means all these education and connections. And I was like, how do I start all that? I'm comfortable with where I am right now. And that was a dangerous part. And I think a lot of people face the same thing, Yeah.
And we're going to talk, as you said, confit and the reincarceration rates in Australia. In proportion, in context of other countries in the world, countries like Sweden, they have a very different prison system and they have much better rates of reincarceration. Now, one of those statistics, Andrew, mate, you went into prison, you came back out, and then you went back in. So you were one of those. Can you talk to us about your childhood and growing up? I think you sort of grew up in that Liverpool area, but what was it like for you? I think what Joe said, you grew up in quite a good family. You had a good family upbringing, but you
Just
sort of
my area.
a poor area where there's a
environment.
lot of adversity and
Yeah, so I had a very similar upbringing to Joe, even though like he was kind of like in the inner west and I was out more western Sydney. And like I came from a pretty good household. Like mum and dad looked after me, mum and dad loved me. But they were slaving away at a job for minimum wage just to get by and put me through education. And because they weren't around and I didn't have any siblings, I kind of found like my belonging amongst my group of friends that I had at school. And unfortunately, in Southwest Sydney, like a lot of the group of friends, the guys are coming up from broken homes too. And that was kind of like the crowd that I was growing up with. And we were always like going to parties, getting drunk. And very similar to Joe, as we got older, like I started getting into selling pills and weed because like that's where all the contacts were. That was our social group, our social circles, and that was the market. And everyone around us was like kind of getting high off pills and weed. So I thought, all right, well, this is my opportunity to make money. And when I got arrested the first time, they were looking for pills in my house, but they found like a BB gun, like a firearm. Anyways, so I beat that charge and I got out, but I was only in prison for a week and I didn't really learn my lesson. Like I went in there, the older boys looked after me, and it was a bit of a shock on my first day. because of the reception cells that you got to go through before you get into the main system. Like it was like absolutely like cockroaches all over the wall, rust in the bathroom. You don't want to take your shoes, your thongs off. It was terrible. And then you get moved into a nice clean wing, and you're like, oh, this is not too bad. And then you have your boys there, like people of the same ethnicity, and they're looking after you. They're doing good time. They're happy. They like got all this food, and you're like, oh, this is not too bad. I can do this. And then I got out, and then when I got out, I was introduced to other people, because like when you don't snitch, people think, oh, this guy is a good criminal that like you can do business with. So you just get like more connects. Anyways, I got introduced to selling heroin, and I thought, wow, this is where the money is. Yeah. And then I thought, okay, cool. Like I'll just keep going down, cruising down this path. And it's like Joe said before, like this is all I knew from like the people that I grew up with and the area that I grew up with. And like, you know, when I was going out, I'd see like the older boys who had like all the girls and were spending all the money in the clubs. Like the only way to get to where I want to get to in life was the way that they get it, like the way they sell money, like the way they make money through selling drugs, and like the amount of girls that they were getting through selling drugs. So I thought, all right, that's if I want to get to where they are at, I got to do the same thing as them. And that's all I knew. And then fast forward, I got arrested. Like, mind you, like I always thought like my way out was sell drugs, save up a lot of money, and then start a business, because that's how I heard like everyone else was getting out of the game. Like they saved up their money, opened up a business, and then they just got out and their business was making all the money for them. And I thought that's how I was going to do it. But silly me, I was spending all my money before I even saved up any money. And then I got arrested. And then when the judge whacked, Joe said, like, you're in disbelief. You kind of think that it's just a dream. You might wake up, but at the same time, your heart has sunk. Like it's sunk. You're upset, but at the same time, oh, this may be just maybe, a bit of hope that this is just a bad dream. But you don't wake up, and then you start, like, reality starts to sink in. You're like, what have I done? What have I done? How did I end up here? Like, and for the first 2 years of my sentence, I was kind of in disbelief, and like I spent a lot of my time not being accountable for myself, because I think like at that point in my life, I was at my lowest, and I kind of like turned to God or someone. Like every day I'd wake up and I'd pray, and before I went to bed, I'd pray too. And I was just looking for someone else to kind of like help me. And then halfway through my sentence, because I was expecting a light sentence for my charges, but mind you, I got charged for commercial supply. But I think what made me get a larger sentence was the fact that I was a habitual offender. Like I got into crime when I've been charged for assault and affray when I was younger, and the previous firearm charge. Like the judge looked at me like, oh, this guy's just a criminal. Yeah. And then the fact that I got 4 years, I was kind of like very upset about that, and I lost faith in God for a bit, and I thought, well, the only person that's going to pull me out of this is myself. So I have to start doing things to better myself. I have to like get more knowledge. I have to upskill, work on my body. I have to do things to improve who I am as a person, because when I get out of prison, I got nothing. I literally have nothing to my name. I didn't save up any money. I don't have any like hookups. I didn't stash any money anywhere. I don't have anyone to give me a leg up. The only person that I have to rely on is myself. So that's when I started, I'll just start training. The first thing I can do, the only thing I can do is start training. And then I'll get my white card, my forklift license while I'm in jail. I'll do whatever I can in jail just to get one leg up for when I do get out. I have something set up for myself. I've done everything that I've done in my power to best give me a chance to survive at life. And then from then on, like when I got out, it's just been leveling up here and there.
And you guys aren't,
and yeah,
you guys are really intelligent blokes. Like it might, based on your experiences and what you've been through, it might be easy to go on there. But you guys have both been through university, and being raised with Asian parents, you had a lot of expectation on your shoulders to do well at university. So you were selling pills all through your time when you were studying. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the whole time when I was studying, so I was studying to be a primary school teacher, and I was selling pills at the beginning, and then I got into the heroin, and well, like the whole time, like all the money that I was making was feeding into the social life in university because you're meeting a lot of people, you're in a lot of social circles. 21st birthday, 22nd birthday, 23rd birthday, 18th birthday, whatever it is. It was just birthdays all year round, and all these different social groups that you were meeting in your classes. Like you were just attending all of those, and I don't know how people survive in uni, but I realized that like I needed to make money to survive to attend all those things.
Yeah.
Those
Andrew,
things are
I
expensive.
know it's a bit of a laugh, but what a primary school teacher you would have made, bro.
Well, you only did it right because it was like you thought it'd be easy. You'd enjoy the school
Yeah.
holidays and all the breaks.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. That's honestly, I was actually lost with my life. I didn't know what I wanted to do. And primary school teacher just seemed like the easy path in life. I go, okay, cool, I'll just cruise. You know, and I wanted security and a job.
And so your mum was slaving away. She'd be going out to work before you woke up, coming home late at night, and your heart didn't just drop when you were arrested, but I think it really dropped when you saw the look on your mum's face when she had acknowledged that you had been arrested. And for a long period of time, a lot of your extended family overseas weren't even aware that you had been arrested because she kept it under wraps.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, like, you know, like it's for her, it was like her only child, shame upon the family. And so I guess I understand why she tried to like keep it like hidden. And I understand, like, if I was in her position, I would have done the same thing too. And I guess like that first time that I saw her on visit, that was like the most heartbreaking moment I've had in my life, because the amount of disappointment and the amount of time that she's poured her life into bettering my life, I felt like I had like let her down more than anything. Like that was just that one moment, and I knew after that, like if I didn't start figuring out my life, that like she would die a disappointed woman, and I couldn't let that happen.
Yeah. And so first week one, you went out to a Silverwater prison, and this is where you got your first taste of prison life, and it was not too long before you were sent off to Bathurst. So tell us a little bit about what it was like being away from your family and friends.
Yeah, Bathurst has a very big indigenous population. When I got there, like, so when I was in Sydney, it was like kind of mixed everywhere. Like you got like even amounts of races in Sydney. But when I got sent to Bathurst, it was a bit of a shock to me, because it was like what, two Asian boys, maybe fair decent amount of Middle Eastern boys, but not that much. Very large indigenous Koori population. There's a fair bit of like, I'd say Caucasian, but you don't really notice the Caucasians unless there's a few that really stand out, because the Caucasians don't really stick together. And and there's a few Islander boys too. The Islander boys really made me feel at home. So I guess like I was really lucky to have them.
Yeah, they're lovely people, aren't they? The way they kind of make you feel. Yeah,
Yeah. They're always good
always
laughs,
nice
and
blokes, yeah.
yeah.
And so you kind of like we were talking about Joe there and how when you're in prison, it was almost your opportunity to like figuratively, but also literally pull yourself out of the shit. Like, so, doing chin ups, doing body weight workouts. And I think you said when you were at Oberon, it was probably one of the easiest periods because you had so many boys around you that would, pull you out of your despair and get you outside doing some body weight workouts and training. And when you went to the young offenders camp initially, I think you said you were trudging through, with shoes on that had been worn by hundreds of prisoners previously. They had like wet, damp sponges in the soles so that you wouldn't injure your feet. And this was really character building experience. And this was kind of when the tables turned, wasn't it? A lot of character development that came out of that.
Yeah, so like I know Joe will remember these memories too, because I remember one time, like, so they have like the photos of all the previous boys that done the intakes before you. And I remember seeing the Asian boys before, and I've seen photos of Joe before that too. So this is kind of when I put a face to who Joe was. But yeah, like, so that experience was, so there's 3 camps that you do. The first camp is 2 nights and, sorry, 2 days and 1 night. Yeah, 2 days and 1 night. And it was just literally walking. And I thought, fuck, this is tough. This is actually tough, carrying a backpack and walking just continuously with these rubbish shoes that everyone's worn before you. But when I got to the end of it, I'm like, okay,
don't
cool,
play it down. It's not just walking.
Yeah,
it's not just walking. You're climbing
yeah,
up.
okay,
You're climbing up hills and
yeah. So you know what? Actually, you know what? This is what was going through my mind when we were walking. So you know how you see on Instagram when people go on these little hikes, they walk down the fire trail to a nice view with their little shorts and their backpack and their nice sneakers. I was like, this is not what I see on Instagram. This is fucking hell. This is like, you don't walk on a fire trail here. You walk through the bushes on these ugly rocks and like there's never even surface. So I was shocked by that. And I'm like, I can't believe people at home think that fucking that's a hike. This is a hike. And then I realized that because back at the jail, the boys would be like, wait until you do the second one. The second one is 3 days and 2 nights. And it's downhill into the valley first, and then you come back up. That's the real hike. And I remember mentally trying to prepare myself because I knew what was coming. I knew that fuck, there's no way of avoiding this. I have to do it. And I thought, all right, what can I do to best prepare myself for that? Well, I need to train as hard as I possibly could. Like, I need to like prep my body so I could survive that because I barely survived that first walk. So I thought, okay, as soon as I get back to the gym, I'm just gonna train unbelievably hard. Lunges, push-ups, burpees, everything that I could do, just keep training 3-4 times a day. I'll just train and I'll do the best that I can. I think it was 6 weeks in between from the first camp to the second camp. I can't remember. Yeah, but I just trained as hard as I could for 6 weeks. And then that's when I realized when I was doing the second camp, my mindset was a little bit different. Like I remember when I was walking up the hill, I was looking around at everyone around me and I'm like, you know what? All these, like maybe only two of the boys were like doing good, but everyone else was struggling. And I was like, fuck, see these kind of struggling? None of them really prepped. None of them really trained hard up until to survive this moment. And I was like, you know, I'm just going to power up the mountain. This is just doing step-ups and lunges. That's all it is, step-ups and lunges. And I remember getting to the top of the mountain and I'm like, yeah, I worked hard for this. This was easy. But it wasn't easy because I was telling myself it was easy. It was more so because I knew I prepped and I'd done everything that I possibly could. Yeah, to make it easy. And that's when I started to realize, wow, you know, if this is what life has to throw at me later on, I can do it. If I just if I prep myself and I put a plan in place and I start putting in work and then translating this into the program that we run, you know, this is what we're trying to do for the boys, just like prep them physically and get them to understand that it's not that hard. You'll survive. But when you survive, you become stronger. And whatever life throws at you, you just got to put one foot in front of the other. And yeah, that was my overall experience.
And I tell Joe, what about your initial experiences? So, is it cliche like you see in movies where, you know, you just got to keep to yourself, not really make too many friends or connections? I think you've discussed that there's 3 type of people in prison. There's gamblers, junkies, and trainers as well. And you guys kind of with that trainer cohort that were interested in keeping physically fit. But is it like you see in movies?
Look, I know the use of the word junkies. You shouldn't. I know I said it, but politically, it's not really correct. Us now later on understanding the issues. But that was the term that we used when we were inside, so that's why we use it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like, look, you know, like the things that you see in the movies is more based around America. you know, and the things that you see in the movies about Australian jails is also based around America because that's what viewers relate to, right? But in reality, there's a lot of different things, right? There is a lot of racial segregation, but it's not the end of everything. And everyone thinks, oh yeah, you got to stick with your race. The culture started like that because in our society, especially around Sydney metropolitan area, there's a lot of different demographics or nationalities that immigrated. And when you look at little different, I guess, subcultures out in society, it's mostly different types of races kind of congregate because like that's what they understand. That's what they it's pretty much it's home for them, right? It's
Familiar.
very hard. It's very hard for someone who's just migrated to Australia to integrate as an Australian, like what an Australian is perceived to be. You know, it's quite hard. They stick to what they're used to. They stay in their comfort zone, right? So obviously those little subgroups in society, you know, there are like no disadvantage and lack of education and working class people and, you know, the second generation kids, obviously they, you know, come like they have parents that are constantly working. Like, for example, Andrew's background, you know, parents are constantly working and, you know, you're pretty much left to defend for yourself. And, you know, the similar type of people kind of gravitate towards each other. And there's a huge, like, I guess the crime rates are much higher in those areas rather than compared to, for example, like North Shore, Eastern Suburbs or wherever. But like the crime rates are much higher there. So when you go to jail, it's the same thing. It's those people some of these people can't speak English very well. And they just stick to their own, I guess, their nationalities or like what they're used to. So there is a mix inside, but when I went in, that whole culture started to shift a little bit because, you know, when I first went in, the older guys were telling me, you got to stick with your own, you got to stick with your own. But sometimes, you know, me being second generation and, you know, I grew up with different nationalities my whole life. And I was like, why do I have to always just stick with the Asians? You know, I know I look Asian, but inside I feel like I'm Aussie, you know. And that's why, you know, that's why I love training because for me, training was camaraderie. It was about community building. So whenever I used to train, I used to always train with people from different backgrounds, different nationalities. I didn't care who you were, as long as you're into training, and we just had a good laugh while we were training. And that's what I loved about fitness and fitness communities because it broke down all these barriers, you know. And that's why I fell in love with it because it doesn't matter who you are. You could be the CEO of a Fortune 500 company, and when you train with me, we're on the same basis. There's no, you're not above me, you're not below me. We're here to train, you know. And that's why I truly believe in what we do at Confit is to create a platform to bridge that social gap. Doesn't matter you're third generation public housing or you're some corporate working as an executive somewhere, but whenever we train, you know, we're on equal playing fields, you know, and we talk about how do we integrate people into the community, you know, and that's how we do it is through fitness communities, you know, they call it the new church, you know. But going back to your question, yeah, it's like it's pretty different. Like in America, you know, in the movies, you know, they talk about all these like sexual violence and all that kind of stuff. It doesn't really happen in Australia unless I don't know what happens in protection, but in the main, that's very taboo. It's frowned upon. I feel like if you're an inmate, somewhat inmates kind of look out for each other. There's a certain kind of initial camaraderie until beef happens, you know, mostly over drugs. You know, like I said, you know, if there wasn't any drugs in jail, I don't think there'd be any violence or hardly any violence. That's what I feel. You know, there are a lot of people with mental health issues inside custody. That's something that we got to point out. So, you know, all these like, you know, everyone thinks, oh, you know, jail is full of violent people and they're psychopaths and all that kind of stuff. But no, you gotta understand there's a huge proportion of people with mental health issues. And people think that they're all violent people, but it's not the violence, it's the environment that kind of turns us, there's a saying that you become your environment. So imagine a place where I'm not a violent person, right? But when you go to jail, somewhat the violent side comes out as a defense mechanism, right? And if you're placed in an environment where you're caged up and you're treated like animals, and the staff don't really add to this, they do. There is a bit of a culture between inmates and staff, where staff have this tendency to treat inmates as second class people, yeah. So and like we were talking about, like you said before, in Norway, they completely shifted that around. They've changed the whole system, and I feel that's one of the biggest things is, that we're all human at the end of the day, and that sense of self-worth, that gets trodden on when you go to prison. Yeah, the moment you step in through those doors, when you have to strip down, being treated like second class individuals, over a period of time, it really takes away your sense of self-worth and your belonging in society, and you just belong to this little yard that's surrounded by concrete walls and razor wires, and that's who you become for a while. So not saying that you're a violent person, but you just become a product of the environment, and that's where all the negativity starts in your head. And that's why training was a huge part of what we did, was because that's something that kept us positive, mentally positive.
So was there any very violent conflicts that you were experienced or faced? What was probably one of the two, if any, that you experienced? Andrew too, you can jump in here, mate, if
I don't know. Do we keep this PG rated?
I just go for it, straight shoot.
Look, I'll tell you a story about my first week in. So, they keep you when you first get arrested. You go to Surrey Hills or a police holding cell. Then they took me to Parkley. So, Andrew, you went to Silverwater, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Silverwater was full. Normally they send you to a place called Darcy. It is hell on earth, so I've heard. But I missed Darcy and I went straight to Parkley. So Parkley, they keep you in a detox wing, and then they put you into like this, like a wing full of just new people coming in off the street. Then they send you out into the main. So the main was like area 1. That's the non-working wing. So there was no Asians there. You know how, like I said, like all the races like kind of like help support and help each other. There was no Asians in that unit. They were all in the working unit, which was area 2. And prison politics, the dominating race would take over the phones. So there was 2 phones in the yard. One phone was only occupied by the Middle Easterns. And the other phone was occupied by the Kuris, which is the indigenous. So if you were any other race, you can't use the phone. And when you first go to a unit, you want to call your friends and family to let them know what's happening. You want to call your legal representatives to find out what's happening at court. You need to use the phone, but I couldn't get onto the phone, any of them. And there was this one time where there was an opportunity. So the indigenous guys, there was a period of time when no one was using it. I was like, sweet, this is my moment. So I ran for it. I made a call to my lawyers. The next thing I know, I get my shirt put over my head, and someone starts laying into me, go, you can't use this phone, kind of thing. And I'm a taekwondo background, and I, not knowingly, I did a roundhouse kick. I got him square in the jaw, and he dropped, right? And I was like, I didn't mean to do that, kind of thing, and literally everyone started running down. And during lunchtime, they call muster. So they lock you in for 1 hour during lunch, and they hand them, not like what you see in America, where there's like a chow hall. We have to eat our lunch and dinner in our cell. So they hand you these like ready-made packs that gets put into an oven and you eat it. So they lock you in for an hour. So during that hour, I got locked in. There was a mob attack going, like brewing up. So the whole unit was screaming at the windows, going, calling out my name, going, "You're fucking dead when you come out. We're gonna kill you." Everyone was banging on the doors, and I was shitting myself. That was like my first day in jail, like in the main, right? And then my cellie didn't help me either. My cellie's like, "Look, you're probably gonna get stabbed, So we're gonna wrap newspapers and magazines around your body, so it lessens the impact of the shank going into your body. And I'm going, oh my God, people are gonna stab me.
Well,
Remember, this is my first day.
been laughing about it then though.
Yeah, I know. I was shitting myself, and then the sweeper comes around. So the sweeper is someone when you get locked in, they go and clean all the units. They empty out the bins, and they're the ones that hand out all the meals and all that kind of stuff. But they're let out in the wing, so they can do whatever in the wing to just clean up. So the sweeper knocks on my door, and he goes, "There's a present from the Asian boys from next door," and he hands me a newspaper underneath the door. Then I open the newspaper, and I shit you not, shank is an understatement. It was a samurai sword. It was like a shank like that big. If I stab someone with this, someone will die, right? So here I am now about to get mob attacked and get like mob shanked. And now the only thing that I could defend myself with is a samurai sword. And I'm thinking in my head, I'm in for drug charges, but I'm about to get murder charges soon. Right? And that was a dilemma that I was in. And I literally I went pale and got, oh my God. And officers started coming out to unlock the doors, to let us go, right? And this Pippa, so the two star, he's the sergeant. He came out and he goes, Kwon, pack your bags, you're going next door. And I was like, what the hell's going on? I was like, I just grabbed all my stuff. I had a samurai sword down my pants. I had newspapers wrapped all around me, magazines and newspaper wrapped all around me. I'm thinking, what's going on? Everyone's staring at me right now, and I'm getting moved to the next door. And I found out later that the Asian delegate heard what happened. And then he's gone, get this guy and move him into a unit right now before bloodbath happens, because there was a bit of a conflict between the indigenous and the Asians at that time. So that's why, hence, I got laid into straight away. So I did not know that, and you know, this guy saved me. This guy said, who knows? I could have been in a vegetable state right now, or could have been dead. Who knows? You know. So that was my first day in jail, and I did 9 years. Yeah.
Oh man, that's a proper baptism of fire. That's fucked.
It really got me worried. I'm going, oh my God, like this is jail? Crap. But you know what? It gets better. I think while you're in remand, that's where all the problems happen, because people are in an unsettled mindset. You know, what's happened like with family, you know, the mind is still outside. Once most people, when they get sentenced, it's like, right, at least I know how long I'm gonna do it. People settle down and they just focus on, okay, what can I do while I'm in here just to better my time, you know? But during that remand stage, like there's a lot of uncertainty. It's a terrible place to be in, actually. Yeah.
Andrew, what about you, mate? I know you kept to yourself a lot, but is there anything, any violence?
Yeah, you know, there was a couple of things I remember with, I'd say it had a lot to do with my character development. Now that I look back, they're like pivotal moments in my life. Like, so like my first 2 years, I kind of kept to myself, played cards, didn't do much. So I didn't get involved in any drama. I wasn't involved in any drugs. I was just kind of like lost and depressed, you know. So I just minded my own business half the time. And then after I got sentenced and I started training, I remember at Oberon, I can't remember exactly why this kicked off, but there was about to be a war between the Aussies and the Asians. And I remember watching, looking outside the unit, there's like 50 Aussies coming up to the unit. Luckily in jail, when you're Asian, there's this thing where you have your allies with the Islanders for some reason. I don't know why. It's been going on like that for years. And even in America, it's like two peas in a pod. The Asians and the Islanders stick together for some reason. We were just so lucky that we had the Islanders to back us up, and they're big boys. They're genuinely big boys. I don't think the Aussies wanted to fight them. And anyways, the drama at that time, I wanted to fight because I was training really hard, and I had like this massive ego about me because I knew I was fitter than everyone. Luckily, we didn't go to war because I probably would have got bashed, because it was 50. Like honestly, that was like 50-20, like 50 against 20. They ended up sorting it out 1-on-1 between the Asian bloke and the Aussie bloke. And then fast forward, like I was still training hard. And I remember just before I got out, this one experience really humbled me because I actually learned that like no matter how hard you train, size actually matters. So I remember I was training really hard and I had my music and I was like, this was like a point in my life where I was like, I had a big ego on me and I was just training really hard and I was like, I kept to myself a lot because at the end of your sentence when you're in minimum security, you get mixed in like if you come from the main population, you get mixed in with population from protection and you don't know who's who. So I kept to myself a lot and I didn't speak to many people because I was like, I'm not sure who's a snitch, who's a pedophile, who's a rapist. I don't know who's who. So I don't want to make friends with anyone just in case I'm like, when you develop a bond with someone and then you find out, oh, fuck, this person's a piece of shit. Well, how do you kind of break that bond after finding out they're a piece of shit, like after you've developed a bond? So just to not cross that bridge, I decided just to keep to myself and only to the boys that I knew from the main. Anyways, so I was kind of like standoffish with a lot of people. And I always trained to myself. And this one time I had my music playing kind of loud and I was training. And this one guy turns off my music. And this guy, mind you, he's like 2 meters tall. Okay. He's a big bloke. He's about 110 kilos. And I thought I could take this bloke. I'm only 70 kilos. 70 kilos. I'm 165 centimeters tall. We had an exchange of words. We went to the kitchen. I did not land a single punch on him. And he literally like whacked me. Every time I stepped in, he whacked me. And my left ear was deaf for a good week. And after that experience, it really humbled me. Maybe I can't fight everyone. Maybe I can't actually like go people. And maybe I shouldn't walk around the yard like I'm the biggest bloke.
Yeah.
And it still didn't stop me from like not talking to people. I still kept to like only the people that I knew. But that really taught me a lesson. Okay, cool. Maybe I have to go through life actually learning how to fight. And maybe I should not be so treat everyone like shit or like just like not talk to people. At least like if someone said hello to me, say hi to them back. Yeah. Because a lot of the times people would say hello to me and I wouldn't even talk to them because I just didn't want to make anyone. And I guess he disliked me because of that. Mind you, I heard this guy on a podcast recently. I don't know if he was actually, because I heard he was a dog before. I don't actually know if he was a dog. And a dog is like someone who snitched.
Yeah.
And you kind of like keep your distance with those people.
Yeah.
Anyways, I heard he was a snitch and that's why I didn't want to talk to him.
Yeah.
And I recently heard this guy speak on a podcast recently. I can't remember whose podcast it was. And I'm like, oh, that's the guy who fucking I last had a crack with. Mind you, like I got nothing against the bloke. I just thought he was a dog, and I don't know to this day if he was an actual dog or not. But I guess that kind of taught me, like, one, don't think you can take everyone unless you're because size does matter. And two, just if someone says hello, don't be like just say hello back. You don't like it doesn't have to go any further than that. It's just being polite.
Yeah.
And I realized that later on too. Yeah.
Do you think in prison, because you're sizing everyone up, you probably overthink everything too? Like you're looking at people thinking, is that come into things a bit? Like you're always second guessing yourself or who you can trust.
I knew how much fitter I was compared to everyone else because I knew, like, I looked in the yard, no one was training as hard as me. Right. Maybe one other person. Like I would be like up early training and I'll be the last one to be training too. And I'd go like I knew the amount of burpees, push-ups, and all of that I was doing. But realistically, that doesn't translate that well into an actual fight.
Yeah.
Like actual fighting skill and movement and like technique does play a massive role too.
Yeah. If we go back to Joe, like that's like honestly, I think it's a really good insight for a lot of people. I can't fathom, what goes on in there. So being able to Joe's stories, that was like fucking intense for your first day. I can't imagine how you felt going to sleep that night. During your time, Joe, there's the negative experiences like we just talked about, the violence, and there was also a lot of positivity. So you're introduced to your mentor, billionaire, in prison, and he taught you a lot about not only accountancy, but also mindset. And that was really important for your self-development and ultimately the birth of Confit.
Yeah. Look, like I said, growing up you know, coming from like all those backgrounds, you don't really know what's out there, right? I went to prison and I saw the commonalities of everyone, you know, the common denominator. Obviously, majority of the people came from a lot of disadvantage, definitely a lot of childhood trauma. Um, but one other thing was the lack of education. I don't think anyone in the yard that I was with at the time went past anyone went into university. You know, no, like I could tell by the way people talked. And I was a part of that statistic as well. You know, I dropped out of school in year 10. And I was my only focus was on becoming a career criminal because that's all I knew. And now that I'm in jail, they say that jail is a university of criminals to network and learn from other criminals to become better at crime. But you know, there was a pivotal moment where I was having a chat with these so-called, you know, career criminals who had a real name for themselves, and they've done more than half their life in prison, right? In and out, in and out. And there was a question that I asked all of them actually, and they all said the same thing. I was like, well, if you're meant to be the 007s of the criminal world, all right, and you're so good at crime, why do you guys keep on coming back to jail? And the answer they all said to me was, "There's no guarantee in this life. There's no guarantee you're going to be safe. You know that, and that's a risk that you have to take." And I was looking at like a 13-year sentence, you know, and I'm like, I'm not doing this again. If I continue down this path, my next sentence would definitely be double digits in jail, you know, maybe more. Like I'm probably gonna get way more than what I previously got. I was like, I can't do another day in jail once I get out. I can't live this life anymore. You know, I want something different with my life. I want something more positive, but I don't know how to do it. I'm like, where do I start? And I was reading this book called Rich Dad Poor Dad. And this is a Lithgow jail. And I was reading this book called Rich Dad Poor Dad, and in the book it said accounting is the language of business, right? And I was like, oh, you know what? I know illegal business, so why don't I go teach myself? You know, I got a lot of time on my hands. This legitimate business, right? So I went to the prison library, got myself an accounting textbook, and as soon as I opened it up, I was just like, I can't do this. You know, what am I reading? This is like hieroglyphics to me, you know, like what is this kind of stuff? Equations? What is this? You know? And then that same day, someone walks into the yard, and he wasn't having a real good time in jail, because the rumor was that he was a billionaire accountant. Everyone was trying to extort this guy because they heard the word billionaire. All I heard was the word accountant, right? And I was like, this guy can really help me, right? So I gave him a proposition that he couldn't refuse, and you know, I said to him, no one's gonna lay a finger on you, and make sure you get the protection of all the boys. In return, you teach me accounting every day. And he ended up becoming my cellmate. And not only did he teach me accounting, but he taught me about business. He taught me about the value of education. And most importantly, he taught me about self-worth. You know, I had to meet a positive mentor in jail. That was the first time I had a positive mentor in my life. And I could see he taught me so much more than these things that I just mentioned, but he is telling me about his business trips overseas, his business dealings with people, his understanding of human relationships and all that kind of stuff. And I was like, I never knew about any of this kind of stuff, you know, and really like, you know, got me to want to change. I was like, I know these opportunities are out there now, you know, and what he did was just map out the path that I could possibly take. You know, I ended up doing my HSC in jail, because my mentor was like, well, if you do HSC, there's a possibility of you going to university. Through university, a lot of other doors will open, you know, like it's not for everyone, but he told me a few options that can happen. That's what I wanted, you know, and it was that mentor who helped me to change my perception on life. And, you know, we're doing the same thing with our mentoring programs right now in youth justice centers. Is the same thing. What my mentor did for me when I was in prison is to just map out and show young people possibilities and opportunities of what could be, rather than what they only know in their current circle right now. You know, and that's where lived experience mentoring comes in as well. And to show them that we've also been to prison, we've been there, done it, and we were able to turn that around. You know, and I think that was the biggest part. What my mentor taught me was about being able to help others as well. You know, he had to show me first to understand. Now I'm showing others, and now we've got a whole team on Confit Pathways of lived experience mentors who are now we're trying to scale that impact, to change as many young people's lives as possible who are currently incarcerated.
And so that moment, you got a lot to thank for Natalie from UNSW, one of your mentors from the university realm. But she, she did wonders for you, as we'll talk about. But when we get to Confit and UNSW, but you didn't shed a tear throughout your time in jail until that day when you received your offer of acceptance into UNSW. So tell us about that moment in time.
Yeah. So when I was getting sentenced at court, and the judge called out 13 years, I was just like ice cold, no emotions. I was like, inside, I was shattered, but I was also thinking, you know what, that's what I did, and it didn't really affect me as much. Even like 9 years of prison life, there's a lot of heartaches that you go through, the frustrations of missing out on funerals, weddings, everything else, everything on the sun. Like you're taken away from society. You're pretty much rotting inside. The world is moving, and you're kind of stuck. And that didn't faze me either. Like it didn't really affect me as much. So in my whole time since I got arrested, I never cried. And this was after when I completed my HSC. And applied for uni, and my mentor and I, we moved to different centers. I was sitting in Wellington Correctional Center playing cards, and the officer walks up to me and he hands me this letter, and he goes, "Kwon, I don't know how you did it, but you bloody did it, mate." And I was like, what is this guy talking about? And I took that letter into my cell out of curiosity, and as soon as I opened it up, it read, "Congratulations, you've been accepted into the University of New South Wales." You would not understand. Like, I was holding on to that letter, and I started bawling my eyes out because no one in the center will understand the feeling of freedom that I was feeling. No one understood the amount of, now, Andrew, like, I know the training side, like for you to be able to lose a certain amount of weight and to become a certain person, it was the same thing. That's a physical and mental thing. But this was like literally nights of, I was literally staying up till 2 a.m. studying because this is the future that I wanted to chase. I had officers ripping out my textbooks because they're going, "Why are you studying? Waste of time." They used to take my textbooks away because they go, "You're hiding stuff in here." And I had to like, go through a semester without a textbook and write to my lecturer saying, the officer took my textbook. I don't have a textbook. I had no computer access. So all my research material had to be done. So everything I did was much harder than what a normal conventional university student would do, because they could just go online and print out whatever, or look online libraries and stuff. I never had access to that. I had to have education staff. I had to go early on to tell them these are the materials that I need to find. And if I couldn't get the information out of that, I had to make sure that I did, so it was twice as hard for me to study than a normal person. And when I got accepted into UNSW, just all that came back going, no one will understand what I had to go through to get here, but only I know. And this is the start, because education literally set me free, and for me, that was my freedom. That was my way out of this life, and that in my head, I was adamant about it, and it worked out. I ended up going to university as soon as I got out. Ended up studying a course creating social change. And I never knew what a not-for-profit or a social enterprise was until I started learning about it at university. And I was like, look, I've got a business idea, which is actually a social enterprise, and that lecturer who's holding that lecture, Dr. Ali Walker, today she's a board member of our not-for-profit. It's come full circle.
Confit Pathways.
Which is Confit Pathways, yeah.
And you guys are actually giving opportunities now for incarcerated youth coming out of prison, an opportunity not only for work but also to regain their life to some extent. So can you talk us through what Confit Pathways is actually doing now to change the lives of those?
Yeah, so Confit Pathways is a Australian registered charity with the DGR1 status. Our mission is to reduce the rates of recidivism of young people that are currently incarcerated through pathways to employment, education, and wraparound support. We're a fitness-based organization, so we deliver fitness programs to be able to relate and break down any barriers that there may be between the mentors and the young people over the 9-week period. And through that program, while these young people are incarcerated, they learn things around goal setting, having a positive mindset, such as goal setting, gratitude, self-worth, self-belief, the value of employment and education. And we create a really, really strong bond. And then once these young people are released into the community, it's a through care model. So when they come out, they receive ongoing mentoring support out in the community through fitness. Now we're about to open up a gym, so they're going to be able to come to the gym every day. And also, remember, I talked to you about being that bridge between the two societies. So they get to mingle with our paying members in the community, so they get to have a different circle of people around them that they would have never been able to kind of interact with otherwise. And that's a way of integrating them back into society. And we also help them to find jobs in different industries. That's not always fitness industry, we can, but it could range from construction, rail, hospitality, whatever it is, and we help them to find employment in these industries as well. And obviously ongoing wraparound support by lived experience mentors. So that's what Confit Pathways does. Around education as well, we really promote our young people to pursue a pathway in education, and we've got that partnership with the University of New South Wales where they provide full scholarships to young people. The thing is, a lot of these, when we come across these really, really talented young people, it's heartbreaking because they've got so much potential, but they fall back into the traps of when they get released. They have, a lot of domestic issues at home. It's just the environment of their brothers, the dad, they're all coming in and out of jail. It's just the circle of friends that they have around them. And I see them, I go, man, some of these kids, like they could be the next president, like the next prime minister, like they've got that potential, but it's hard to nurture them when they're living in this environment. So we also, in this scholarship, it's on-campus accommodation as well. So we want to plug them out of their environment, put them into a very positive environment where they're supported and nurtured around academia and having that lifestyle of being able to study and try new things, and having an open mindset around new environments and new cultures, and that's what we're trying to promote as well. So that's the partnership that we have with UNSW and the scholarship stream through Confit Pathways.
That's awesome. And you've also partnered with G'd Up, I think it is, through Confit Gym as well. So how are you working with those guys to establish a connection with the young?
Yeah, so G'd Up's always had a strong culture with their following. And they're a street label brand, but there was a bit of an issue of a lot of young people getting arrested wearing G'd Up merch, and G'd Up is all about street culture, but they're not about supporting or endorsing criminal activities. All right. So they wanted to have a stance in this to show all their followers that's not what we're about. We're about supporting the community in a positive way through culture, right? So they wanted to partner up with a charity that had a similar social purpose mission, which was us. And they donated $250,000 through the sale of one of their drops to support in establishing this gym to be able to mentor young people coming out the justice system. And it's a pretty cool brand alignment as well. It's very connected in that we share very similar values between the two organizations. So it was just a natural fit.
And I think one of the things that I wanted to talk to you about was we talked about Natalie and her role at UNSW. And initially, you had that first lecture, and it was ironically just like your first day at jail, where you had that massive violent conflict at the phone booth. And then your first lecture at university is on social change.
Yeah.
And helping reduce recidivism and also homelessness and disadvantaged youths in prison. Now, Dr. Ali Walker, who was actually doing that lecture, so she introduced you to the Centre for Social Impact, and Confit was eventually born.
Yeah.
And now it's actually been used as a case study for the MBA program at UNSW, which is massive as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's actually started off as Dr. Ali Walker introducing me to some MBA students and getting my idea on as part of an MBA project. And they helped us to formulate what Confit is as a social enterprise today. And it was quite interesting to be able to delve into the minds of all these MBA students, doing matrix mapping and, like future strategies and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it was very interesting, like to know about the social impact side, more about how do we measure our social impact, what is a theory of change and like all that kind of stuff. So it was a different world that I didn't understand, but which now that's our bread and butter these days.
One question I would have for you, Joe, is one of the barriers to scaling up this program or the Confit Pathways as a whole, the unwillingness, I imagine, for a lot of people to train with criminals based on a lot of those stereotypes that we talked about previously. So is that something you've noticed being a barrier, or has people just accepted it and really got involved and wholeheartedly, really engaged and enjoyed it?
It's 50-50, right? So our one of our mission is to break down that stereotyping. And it is super important who we bring in as well onto our team to be able to scale. But from my experiences, we've had nothing but support. Obviously there are the 2% that that show their dislike for what we do, but the real main majority are very supportive of our social cause as well, because I think society is much educated these days compared to maybe a decade or more ago, where the society's perception was, well, if they've done the crime, lock them up, give them stale bread, throw away the keys. But I think now society knows that the issues are so much more deeply embedded than the actual crime itself. I know that there are some really bad people out there that are currently in jail, which I truly believe that should not be let out, but that's a very, very small minority. The majority of people, like I said, mentioned before, stem from a background of disadvantage, childhood trauma, lack of opportunities. And it's that what we should not be judging an individual on the actual act itself, but what were the root causes that led this individual to do that act, and obviously by law, you got to pay the price for the crime that you did, but they should not be punished afterwards when they're out in society, when they've already served their time, and that's why a lot of inmates face when they're released into the community is the ostracization and isolation and not feeling accepted by society, and not being given the opportunities and all that kind of stuff. So we're trying to change that through what we do best, which is fitness. And Andrew's always out there getting his face out on social media, and and I think that's how we need to be as transparent as possible to go, look, this is who we are, this is the crimes that we did, these are stories, but this is what we're trying to do to better society, and that's been our mission, and it is hard, but we've never had any clients saying we don't want to train with you because you guys are inmates. It actually adds a bit more interest and curiosity for people wanting to come and train with us, because our saying is, do you really want a fitness coach that doesn't have much life experience, who've gone and got their Cert 3 and Cert 4 qualification, and they've been working in a gym the whole time, or would you want someone that's actually hit rock bottom, and go into the depths of prison, having to overcome that through fitness, that adversity, having that resilient mindset, and coming out of that and becoming a coach to be able to help others to turn their lives around, like, who would you rather want? I feel that we're much more of an interesting choice to delve into as well. And that's what we're trying to do to change that perception around society. I think people are starting to understand this after lockdown. Now more people are going, right, okay, maybe these guys have something to teach us.
And it'll be interesting to hear, in particular, Andrew's thoughts on this, because we're basically, I've gone through and found some research looking at the reincarceration rates in Australia. And basically what they found in Australia, currently we have the highest incarceration rate since Federation. So over recent decades, the imprisonment rate has steadily increased since 1985 by about 130%. Now, if we look at that, 61% of young people aged between 10 to 17 who are released from detention centres return within 6 months, and 80% within 12 months of their release. These people are often disillusioned, intimidated, and this contributes to them going back and reoffending. Now, I wanted to ask you and Andrew what your thoughts are. Do you think that the lack of opportunities, the lack of jobs when you leave prison is a massive contributing factor to these increasing rates of imprisonment, but also those going back into jail as well or reoffending?
Look, there's look, those statistics change over time. It has been increasing, and then during COVID, it's decreased. Obviously, the courts were trying to minimize incarceration levels. Sometimes the courts weren't even running, and it was a bit of a chaos. But it'll be interesting to see the figures right now. Now everything's starting to stabilize again. But the cost to the community is massive. Like, to house a single adult in custody each year, it's nearly $150K a year. It's $148,000. Try and make that out in working for corporate or something. For youth, it's $714,000 a year to house them, in custody.
Wow.
It's freaking ridiculous. By preventing 20 young people going inside, it's saving over $20 million. So 10 young people going inside, $20 million. In regards to the issues of why people go back inside, you've got your main issues of, lack of the housing, employment, education, community support, substance abuse issues, mental health issues. These are reoccurring issues that why people are going back into custody. Yep. They're more of the tangible stuff, right? But there's a lot of psychological issues as well. So for example, there's a lot of people that don't understand, what's best for them. For example, I was touching on the subject of self-worth before. Some people don't believe that they're capable of doing something different, or there are pathways to do something different. And I say, this is one thing I say, everyone's like, Andrew and I, we try so hard to change the mindset of these individuals who are incarcerated, and a lot of people go, no, if you give them a job, if you give them housing, a little bit of education, they'll be all right. But the thing is, what you got to make them want to change in the first place. A lot of the people that are returning back to custody are repeat offenders. That's something that they know. That's something that they're used to. We look at the young people in youth justice centers. It's always the same faces. Majority of the time, it's always the same faces who are keeping these statistics up. So they're the ones that are maintaining these statistics. It's the same guys that are coming in and out. And how do we change them? It's like, how do we change them? Like, you got to be able to change their perception and their mindset to want to change themselves. You can't just give them a good prize or like a house or something. They're gonna come back in. So you got to change the root causes from the beginning. And that's the psycho factors of of helping these individuals to not reoffend.
Yeah, and as I said, the reason, Andrew, your opinion on this would be really interesting is because you actually went back into prison. As we said, you're a repeat offender. So what are your thoughts on as to why that would occur, and if that relates to what we just spoke about?
If I had to analyze the situation on a macro level, at a big society level, like, I'm the only minority on my team. When I looked at the other boys of the Confit team, like, everyone grew up without a father. So I think a male role model and a male mentor figure is absent in a lot of their lives. And, when Joe was saying before, when he realized, like, he found his mentor, someone to guide him into the right way. And then I was just sitting there and I was thinking, I was reflecting on my life in my sentence. When did I really make the change? yeah, it was the change when I was at Oberon, but this is going to be the first time that I mention it like to someone or a podcast. I realized that I did actually have a mentor when I was inside. And Joe knows this person too. His name's Bears, this Korean bloke, and he was my cellie. And he was like kind of like the beginning. I just like when I was reflecting when Joe was talking, I realized that he would kind of like planted seeds into my mind to change because he was my cellie and he was talking a lot about family. And he was always reminding me, he was just drilling into my head, Andrew, you know, when you get out, don't disappoint your mum again. Make sure that you do everything right by her because she's your mum. And I guess that started planting the seeds into like what I was gonna do when I was gonna get out. And you know, like when I look at all the boys inside, and the common denominator seems to be that they don't have a male mentor or role model in their life to guide them. And when I'm creating my content, the content that I create for my clients and myself is content for who I was 5-10 years ago. Like, what can I say to help myself 5-10 years ago? Because if I could say and produce these things, maybe I wouldn't have ended up here. And I guess with all the boys, is they're just lacking that male role model inside their life, and it's absent. So when they have those absent male role models, they look for
Positive
they look
ones.
towards them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Positive
Yeah.
ones.
They look. Yeah. Well, like if the boys don't have, if these male role models are absent in their lives, they'll look towards like rappers, you know, who are portraying this lifestyle, this lavish lifestyle that the media blows up, and they think, all right, well, that's who I'm going to be in my life, you know, and then they go down that path, a life of crime.
So
And
you're trying to be their
so I
male.
guess
You're trying to be their male role models. So they can develop that 1-out fitness mentality, which is like the 1-out training. So you're like their role model in a sense with your content.
exactly. And like, you know, I wish I had someone like myself or a fitness influencer to really guide me when I was younger. Because then instead of going down the path that I went down, thinking that the drug dealer life was the way to go, I would have went down a fitness lifestyle.
Yeah, it's such a good story of like redemption and you know, coming of age. You guys, you've been through the shit, you've come out the other end, and you've really found your passion in fitness. One of the things that I found was really interesting when I did a bit of research before this podcast. Anyway, the rates of recidivism across the world. So there was this systematic review that looked at recommendations for best practice for jail facilities. What they found was that the Nordic countries, such as those we discussed about before, actually have a reputation for higher quality national crime statistics than countries like Australia. And there was this news article that the ABC published, which looked at the open prisons in Sweden. And just outside the capital of Stockholm, the prisoners have their own car park. They can commute to jail and to work every day. They can call the jail and have meals ready for them if they're returning home late. And these prisons are found across, as we said, Sweden, Norway, Denmark, Finland. And currently the prison population there, at the time of this article being released, 17,000 prison population in Sweden, whereas in Australia we have over 42,000 prisoners and more than 2 million in the USA. So those statistics are, you know, really, really highlights that there's something they're doing differently that we're not, that we could potentially learn from. Is there anything there, Joe, that maybe you think we could be doing better in our prison system?
Yeah, so I actually went to Norway, visited one of those open prisons. I ran a fitness program for inmates at the center. It was an eye opener. It was a complete different system. But my whole objective of going to that trip was to have a better understanding of what they're doing so right and compare it to our current Australian system and how we might be able to implement, or can we actually implement some of this stuff? You know, like if that stuff's working, then why hasn't Australia done it already? You know, wouldn't it make sense to just like have a cookie cutter model and just copy their system and their models that they're running over there in Scandinavia? And I realized that it's not possible. There are so many factors that are not able to, comply with what's happening in Australia or the US or wherever, or other developed Western countries. So to start off with, the population of the prisons, you've got to also look at the population of the country, which is much smaller than Australia as well. You got to also understand the different cultures. So in Australia, like I said, we have different nationalities. Over there, when I went there, they were all Norwegians because they don't have any immigration policies. So everyone was Norwegian, that Swedish model started crumbling when they opened up the doors to refugees, and the refugees started having small little cluster communities. Their crime rates spiked, and when they went into prison, apparently this prison system that was designed for the Nordics did not match with all these migrants that were coming into custody now. So apparently that wasn't working. It would be really interesting to see the new studies of like how the prison system looks now, since Sweden has opened up the doors to migrants or to refugees, But when I was there, the system was built perfectly for Norway or Sweden, all the Scandinavian countries. It was built perfectly. It was more humanizing than dehumanizing. It was more about rehabilitation than it was for punishment. Because, when you look at change research, you understand that you can't have rehabilitation and punishment at the same time. It's got to be one or the other, and it was interesting to see how their system was built around, okay, well, how do we, normalize everyday life? So when inmates get out, they're not institutionalized. For example, they had credit cards or bank cards linked to bank accounts on the outside to actual banks. They had an Aldi style supermarket where inmates could go and mingle with males and female inmates at the supermarket, right? Like you do in normal society. Buy your groceries except for alcohol. You could buy everything else except for alcohol, and do your shopping. You also get paid proper wages when you work. Not like in normal jails where it's slave labor and it's seen as a privilege to work, to get out the unit and not get attacked, and have to face the elements of getting stuck out in the unit. But over there, they actually pay you wages, right, that are competitive as the ones on the outside. You pay tax, so you're paying tax to the government. You pay rent to rent out your prison cell, right? And you also pay like victims comp or whatever it may be, right? So now, like, I'm thinking, going, the Scandinavians are pragmatic people. They're not there because they go, oh, we want to put all this money to help these people. But in a way, it's cost saving for them as well. The whole reason why they were able to start this was the number one political campaign leader is someone who can minimize taxes, because they pay one of the highest taxes in the world, right? And for them, it was, look, we don't have to put your taxpayer dollars into the prison system. Rather, we can minimize those costs and create a better way of life for inmates when they get out. And we can divert those costs into other things like, providing better education, sending your kids overseas for free to be educated, and, like everything else like that benefits society, rather than building more prisons, and they're by law, the maximum sentence is like 15 years. So they're saying is, eventually these people will be let out into the community and potentially be your next door neighbor. Would you rather want someone who is rehabilitated and have opportunities to do something positive in society, or would you rather want someone who is institutionalized and goes back into crime, and potentially they're your next door neighbor and you might be affected by their crime? It's like, what would you rather want? I think like Scandinavian society, it was much faster for them to realize the benefits of doing this. Trying to get that across the line with our government is another story. Imagine someone going, oh, we're gonna, when there's all these media articles about people getting killed and shootings on the street and stuff, and then all of a sudden they go, oh, we're gonna give these guys opportunities and, better living conditions and stuff. There's gonna be an outroar. And that's what I'm saying. Our mission is to try to break down the stereotyping about not just the minority of cohorts who are creating havoc for the community, but for the rest of the prison population who's in there because of all these other disadvantaged substance abuse issues and, you know, trauma, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. So
something which would have had to been developed over a long period of time.
20 years it took them.
Yeah.
2 decades ago, they had the exact same system as what all the developed Western countries had.
Can you imagine doing it in the US?
I think US is a complete different.
A different kettle of fish. Hey?
It's a different monster on its own. You know, there's a lot of conspiracy behind it, but you know, the privatization of all the prisons, and you know, for them it's like there's also the, you know, the over-representation of African Americans in custody. You know, there's watch the Netflix show called 13th. It's about the 13th Amendment, how they've it's a little bit, it may feel like conspiracy, but it makes sense. You know, like you know, they got rid of slave trade. You know, the 13th Amendment is your right to freedom.
Yeah.
And they abolished slavery. But in saying that, there was a little clause saying if you have a criminal record, this 13th Amendment does not apply to you. You know, and why is it that, you know, they've made it so that communities of African Americans have a higher crime rate? They're incarcerating them, and when they get incarcerated, you know, they don't have the right to vote. They don't have the right, a lot of liberties, you know, are taken away from them. And on top of that, there's a lot of industries that are set up in prisons. You know, they've had, the funny thing was, they had like Victoria's Secret, you know, inside a private jail. You know, they had all these factories set up in private jails that having inmates to work at like absolute slave labor prices, you know, to make money for these like multi-million-dollar companies. For example, you know, at Park Lee, I know they don't have the contract now. Park Lee's got like this wood shop, and they had the contract for Freedom Furniture to make the bases for their sofas and their beds. And how ironic is it to have a company called Freedom Furniture and having inmates to make to do all the slave labor for them? You know, it's crazy, right? Yeah.
The Sweden, they have such better
just for reference
services, and I think their mediating programs are diverting people away from prison before they even get people are like locked up. And something the worst of the worst get locked up, like those that have committed atrocities like murder and so forth. So it does make sense, but as you say, there's always two sides to the coin, and
100%.
It's a trade-off between, you know, treating prisoners the way they want to be treated to promote reform or rehabilitation, but then also having to serve the time for as a punishment of what you've done, the crime you've committed. So
yeah,
it's an interesting discussion. If there's anyone listening to this episode, we'd love to hear your thoughts on the any of the Instagram, Facebook posts that come out with this episode. Let us know what you think, and hopefully our community can engage in the discussion. But I want to move back now. We've talked a lot about Confit, and it's really exciting to see Andrew with 1 Out training. What you're doing now, it's amazing. I've looked through all your Instagram posts. I was even going to ask you some questions about some of the stuff you're doing with your little edits on Instagram and that. For those that are listening that want to follow Andrew on Instagram, it's at 1 Out Training. Really insightful points and tips for people to get started with fitness. And what can you tell us about 1 Out Training, Andrew? What does 1 Out mean?
So 1 Out was like a term that I came up with. It's not, I didn't come up with, actually. It's a term used in jail. It's more so to do with, like, for me, it was more independent. So what a 2 out meant was like 2 beds in a cell, 3 out, 3 people in a cell, 3 beds. 1 out was like independent on its own. But the first time that I heard the term used in jail that wasn't related to beds was when boys were having a crack. I remember this Islander bloke saying, "Bro, just let him go 1 out, yeah? No one 2 out him. So no one else jump in, just 1 out. So that's it." And then like there would be days where I'd be training, and then I'd end up training by myself because my training partner might be at visits or whatever, or at work or whatever. And the boys would ask me, "Bro, where's your training partner?" And I'm like, "Oh, just doing it 1 outs today." So then that's kind of when I created that for my business. And like when I moved from Oberon to Dawn de Lowers, I had to learn how to train by myself because I didn't want to mingle with everyone because I didn't know who was from the main population or protection. So I had to kind of like really dig deep into my mindset about, well, learning to train on my own. I can't be reliant on anyone's motivation. I can't be reliant on someone to pull me out. I have to do it on my own. If I want to get to the finish line the day that I get out and have a six pack, I need to learn how to do things on my own. So that's kind of where the name for the business came about when I got out. And I thought, oh, you know what? As a coach and as a trainer, I need to be able to teach people how to train on their own. I can't be holding their hand forever. I need to teach people how to do things on their own because, schedules will change. Training partners will, have to live their life eventually. They can't be with you forever. And same thing with coaches. They can't be with you forever. They have to give you the tools to live your life on your own. So I thought as a business, I'm going to teach people how to train on their own, be one out. And I guess with my Instagram page and my socials, it's pretty much how I get to do things on my own. Like at the end of the day, I still seek people's advice. I still have a team around me. I get people to I work with a team with Confit. I don't do everything on my own, but staying fit and healthy, I have to do that on my own because no one's schedule is the same as mine. So yeah, I guess that's a bit and it's a bit about my journey too. Because as a person, I'm still a student of life. I still am learning from other people. I'm still growing as a person. I don't know everything. I don't have all the answers. So it's a little bit about where I've come from and where I'm heading. And yeah, people get to tune in on my life.
And now you've got Vow to be Fit Fam. And I understand you're working more with couples that are ready to get married. Is that correct? And you kind of focus on that?
Yes. So with Vow to be Fit, I decided to create kind of an academy or a team for my clients. So a place for me to post my clients. And it's not just to do with weddings. It's more so with your life, you need to take the vow to be fit. To live a happy life, you need to do some form of fitness. And I thought, oh, what a great way to also do wedding packages. So one of my clients is about to get married and she wanted to get her whole bridesmaid team fit for the photos and all of that. And I thought, oh, well, what a great way to sell packages and coach a whole team also. So why not kind of create another page for me to post my clients and use it as a way to sell my wedding packages too.
Yeah, I love it, mate. And it's awesome that you're doing that. And I think it's a credit to everything that you guys do through Confit as well and what you've learnt through your experiences. One of the questions I got from listener Michael has asked, because he's obviously interested in your online coaching business. So your tips for managing a client base online. So what would you say some of your biggest tips? I think a lot of the face-to-face PT, gone are the days where it's solely in the gym. Now a lot of those trainers are online and that's how they're running their businesses and it's easier to scale up. So what are your tips in terms of how you work with your online clients?
My biggest tips are use Google Calendars. So I obviously live my life and I have to do my own training and I have the Confit also running these mentor programs. I live a pretty wild and busy life, but I also need to make sure that my clients are doing the right things. So how I keep track of that is Google Calendars, even if it's 15 minutes, 20 minutes, client reminders, just block it into my schedule to keep my clients accountable. So the best way to manage it is putting your own time block into time for the clients to make sure that they're on track too.
Yeah.
So you got to put that into your schedule also.
It's not just about the program, not just about the diets, all about the accountability as well, making sure they're staying on.
Yeah, it's the accountability. Look, it's pretty much, it's the equation is easy, yeah? Go exercise and eat clean. It's pretty much easy. You just need someone to remind you to do it.
Yeah. All right. And biggest learning for both of you in terms of what you've been through?
Joe, you want to do that one first or?
Biggest learning? Look, I guess the biggest one is around the value of time. Someone that I had nearly a decade taken away from them, don't don't take anything for granted, and that's one of the big things that we teach on our program is, gratitude, and that's what I took a lot of things for granted before I got arrested. And when I went to jail, all these little small things really mattered to me. Who would have thought a piece of paper would be that valuable in certain situations? Having a pen, like I even valued when I was in segregation once, I had no TV, I had no letters, I had nothing, no food. The only thing there was a dictionary. It was a Macquarie dictionary just left on one of the shelves, and literally I went through the whole dictionary for like a couple of weeks, and I was like so grateful for something like that. Who'd ever think of a dictionary, But for me that was massive, like the little things. Yeah, that's like even like everyone knows cold showers is good, but even being able to have a shower, so just be grateful for the little things and make every moment count as well. I know everyone says, "Oh, you make every moment count, high fives," but in reality, what we're saying is, like I missed out my whole 20s. But in saying that, why can't I live to my fullest and the best, from now on? You can't be living in the past going, I missed out on this. I didn't do this, I didn't do this. But you know what? You've got now and you've got the future to make the best possible opportunities for yourself. It's never too late. So just that's making every moment count. I know, Andrew, you value your time very much. But at the end of the day, my thing is, okay, it's about the quality of what you do during that time as well. So it's like, when you meet someone, do you just half-ass it and you're on the phone and whatever? But if you're actually with them, you're with them, you're present with them, because at the end of the day, you never know what might happen. You might never see this person again. Something might happen. So it's the lasting memories that you create in the experiences at the same time, so that's me. That's one of my learnings.
Yeah, it's kind of similar to Joe's, like in terms of like time doesn't stop for no one. And I remember saying that on my 25th birthday, that time doesn't stop for anyone. And I realized that because, when I was calling all my friends, weddings were happening, uni graduations, businesses were starting, houses were bought, first kids were getting born, like all these things were happening. And I was absolutely frustrated. And I realized that time doesn't stop for no one. And I guess that's why, like Joe said, like I'm always like busy doing something, and I time block everything, and I try to make most of every single hour of the day. And if I'm doing, I have to be productive. I have to get to where I want to get to. So I'm always in a rush, and I'm always thinking about what to do next. Like I'm never present in the moment. I'm always thinking about what to do next, unfortunately. But but when I say this to the kids, like when we're mentoring them, I'm like, look, guys, if you really want to reach your goal, you have to be tight with your time, and not just saying like be smart with your time. So let's say, for example, I have 2 months left until my first boxing fight, and I have to make use of that 2 months. Am I gonna learn? Am I gonna go and box by myself and just try to teach myself, or am I gonna get a coach to teach me? So if you have 2 months, like I'm always big on getting someone who's made the mistakes before you to coach you, to save you time, so you don't end up making the mistakes on your own. And the same thing with my business. I'm not gonna try to figure out everything on my own. I'll hire someone who's successful in my field and teach me, so I don't have to make the same mistakes. And I tell that to the kids too. If you want to learn powerlifting, go get a powerlifting coach. You want to learn how to fight, go get a fighting coach. You want to learn it, you want to get a business, start a business, get a business coach. Don't try to do all these things on your own. Get someone who's got the blueprint so you can save time, because time doesn't stop for anyone.
Very good, mate. And it's really important lessons for everyone. Very pertinent. Before we go, I might just get you, Joe, to share where people can find more about Confit Pathways as well on social media.
Yeah, so you can look us up at Confit Pathways, or you could check out our website at www.confitpathways.org. Yeah, so just repeat .org, not .au. Yeah, so you could find us there. And you can also find us on at Confit Gym as well, at Confit_gym on social media, on Instagram.
Thanks for your time today, guys. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having us on.
Bro. Thank you for having us. It's been a pleasure.